So many of you have been asking us to talk about the human experience behind being a human behavior in our workplaces. And we get it. In fact, so much of what we've been writing about is understanding the workplace trends. So today we've decided to bring on a wonderful human, one of my fellow professional speakers. His name is Mark Black. I'm sure you've been exposed to Mark already. He is a resiliency expert. And what we're going to talk about today is honoring and acknowledging that it's pretty challenging to work out the organizational context today. We get it. Let's dive into how you perhaps are experiencing the reality of that organizational context. Mark, I'm curious. First of all, thank you so much for joining us. You are so generous with your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Mark, I'm curious, are you hearing from audiences and people that write into you that part of the challenge of being in the workplace today is that some people are over here and some people over here about managing the different workplace trends that all seem to be in play at the same time?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Right. I mean, we have most organizations that I'm working with, they have some people working at home, some people working in the office, some people happy about that, some people not happy about that. And some people getting to choose their own schedules. Some people are on a forced here and there schedule that is fixed. Some people are allowed to come and go. Like, it's all over the map, and people are struggling to catch up with that mindset and that adjustment of what does work look like in 2023 versus what it looked like in 2019.
Yeah. So I think we must be speaking with the same folks. And my heart goes out to people because they're just doing the best that they can. And that's, I think there's an acceptance and there's a tolerance about that to some extent. When folks run out of perhaps patience, because it's like, listen, we're trying to adapt to schedules, we're doing the best we can to recruit people, how do we also be able to support people where they're at, that we're allowed to be frustrated and in struggle with also being able to acknowledge that that is a very human experience? Tell us about where resiliency comes into play with that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, so I think one of the biggest misnomers about resilience is that it's about bouncing back. That's the analogy that we're always given. You even see these graphics online of the bouncing ball, and we bounce back from adversity. There's no bouncing back because there's no back to go to, right? I think we all acknowledge 2023 is a different world than it was 2019. Spring is a different world than it was 6 months ago. So to pretend like we're just going to return to normal is an impossible task to try and accomplish. And so we have to begin there and say, okay, it's going to be different, and different isn't bad. It's just different. And if we can get our heads around that idea, and the idea that, the good old days were never as good as we imagined, as we remember them to be, first of all. So maybe we don't need to go back, right? Or we don't want to go back, rather. And second of all, we can't anyway. So let's think about what will today and tomorrow look like, and how can we make those effective and efficient and good places for people to be, and more conducive to productivity, but also job satisfaction and enjoyment and fulfillment and all of those things.
And I think one of the many things that you just shared there is the word "and." And it's that solution-focused person in me that I keep listening for that. And what I think the power of what you bottom lined it with, it's all of these things. It's satisfaction and productivity. And so what happens when we don't honor the "and" for ourselves and each other? How does that maybe keep us focusing on different, or why wasn't it? I'm just wondering if there might be something there about where the struggle is for folks in navigating and managing this. If we're seeing it not as an "and," we're seeing it as this is more important than that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it disperses our efforts, right? So it whenever we're less focused on solutions, I talk all the time about how our two most finite resources in business and personally are our time and our energy, right? So we can, money's important too, but we can get more of that. You can't manufacture time, and we all have X amount of energy every day that we can do things to preserve, but ultimately I mean, we've all had the day where we're just like, I am done. Sometimes we've had the month or the year like that. And so if that time and energy is finite, then doesn't it make sense to spend those resources where they're going to have the greatest impact? And what most often happens in these contexts is we are wasting large chunks of time and energy trying to control the uncontrollable, wishing things were different than they are, trying to be all things to all people. There's all kinds of ways that we do it. And so the tool I try and give people is to the mental exercises to what I call shorten the gap. So whenever adversity strikes, we have these two key moments. There's the moment of, oh no, like this thing happened that we weren't anticipating or we didn't want or whatever, whether that's a pandemic or a staffing shortage or whatever it is. And then we get to a place of, okay, now what? So we have, oh no, and then we have now what? Like, how are we going to handle this? And the problem becomes, how big is that gap of time between those 2 points? Because that gap can be 2 minutes or 20 years, depending on mindset, organizational structure, a whole lot of things. And in between there is all this wasted time and energy where we're spinning our wheels and we're getting frustrated, et cetera. And so it's about moving as quickly as we can, not pretending it's not there, but saying, okay, this has happened. We get it. What are we going to do about it? How can we figure this out?
I had such a light bulb moment. I got out my pen and a Post-it note, Mark. This is how much you just like connected some dots for me. And I bet you other people too are watching this. The oh no, now what? That might be what's happening right now. That somebody has a shortened version of oh no, now what?
Yeah.
And other people have a really, really long one. So how do you help folks who have a short versus long, like where people are at different places? Do you have any tips?
Yeah, I mean, so I think part of it is the folks that are good at that or that have a short gap. We have to practice some empathy and some patience, right? Because I think it's unfair to expect that everybody's going to be as quick to adjust. Some people either naturally have that skill, have some more experience in it, whatever the case is, they're just going to do it better, more naturally than others. At the same time, we have to help those people get there because until then they're dragging us, they're kind of an anchor on change. So whether that's maybe pairing those different personality types or those different experiences together to say, hey, person who's figured this out, how do we help this other person to come along for the ride here? I think another piece is to help that person who's dragging along to understand that the more we resist it, the harder it becomes. So I believe, sure, change is hard, but the biggest part of change that's hard is our resistance to it. Like we make it harder on ourselves because we're just going, but I don't want to. Right. Whereas if we just said, okay, let's figure it out. I don't need to have all the answers. Let's just see what happens. Instantly, it becomes easier because we're not holding ourselves back.
Yeah. And the first question when I teach people about the 5 most powerful questions when we have a solution-focused conversation is the first question is, what do you most want? So I love how that is also an evidence-based resiliency strategy. Because we know what we want, and I may want something different from you. We probably have some shared things that we want. Yes. How do we close the gap if I don't even know what you want and I'm making assumptions? Wow. I just got goosebumps. That maybe that is one way to shorten the gap and also to shorten the emotional gap between people when we only see differences and we don't see that we are on the same resiliency journey. We just may be at different points. Yes. Perhaps one of the most powerful questions is, well, what do we want? Yeah,
absolutely. I love that. And so part of the framework that I teach people is understanding what is your aspiration, right? So where collectively, like, so what's our organizational aspiration? Where are we going together, but also individually? What is that thing that gets you out of bed in the morning? Why do you show up? And it's not just a paycheck. We all know that. Sure, we all need to pay bills, but why is one person showing up with more of themselves and giving more of themselves than the person who's being paid the same amount beside them? Well, it's because that person has connected at a deeper level in some way to what we are doing here, whether that's they love the work and so it's about the actual execution, or it's about the end result and they have a passion for who you're serving as an organization. What is that thing that gets that person fired up and excited? And it's going to be different, as you said, for each person. And so the better we do as leaders, managers, understanding what drives, Susan differently from what drives Bill is going to help us to keep that person motivated, keep that person engaged, and therefore create a culture of people who are all pulling together.
And I wonder if it's also accepting for ourselves that my big why and what is most important to me and what I most want might be different hour to hour, day to day, month to month. If I look at how I did a year ago versus now, that perhaps it starts from a level of aspiration and awareness within ourselves. How many people walk around the world and they go, oh, I know my why. Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure. Ask me. Go ahead and ask me. Do you have a lot of people in your audiences who are so clear on their why? We speak for really smart, accomplished people, and I don't think we're all walking around with this great big clarity of our why.
100%. I agree. I think if you stopped anybody, if you did that exercise and stopped people on the street and said, hey, why do you do what you do? Most people would struggle to answer that question. And again, not because they're not focused and hard workers and all of those good things. Probably they've never taken the time. Probably they've never had someone ask the question and prompted the thinking, and they're just caught up in the busyness of execution and living life and doing all of the things that we all do. And it's unfortunate because it, to me, is the single greatest thing you can do to pull yourself through challenging situations. So when people say to me, and I'm sure you get this question all the time too, well, come and motivate our people. And I always say, well, I can't do that because I don't know what motivates them. And you can't do it either unless you know individually what motivates each of those people. And they probably can't do it for themselves because they don't know either. So if you want to do something, ask them to articulate their why, their purpose, their aspiration, whatever you want to call that thing. One of my favorite quotes, Friedrich Nietzsche, philosopher, said, the person with a big enough why can endure anyhow. So once you know why you do what you do, and that why you do what you do matters to you at some core deep level, it's not the mission statement on the plaque in the hallway that somebody else has told you is the reason. It's what your reason is. You'll crawl over broken glass, right? You'll figure out a way. And we just have to help people to figure out what that is.
Well, I think you have beautifully come back full circle to why we chose to focus on how people are experiencing work right now, rather than have another article, not to minimize the importance of understanding trends. However, I think what you just said, if we understand the why, then it allows us to get through and navigate all kinds of hows. And right now we've spent so much of our time focused on how are we going to get through this shift, this turnover crisis, this new organizational change, this procurement issue, this supply shortage, and all of those are important. And if we know why we are pushing so hard to get people in the door, to get the supplies, to why we choose to do this work, stay in this industry, then we probably can manage, and those things don't feel quite so overwhelming. I mean, they're overwhelming, and resiliency, if I understand correctly, is staying grounded in the aspiration, your big why, about why this matters to you, why you show up and try to do your best with all of the barriers that may exist in the current environment.
Yeah.
And being able to know that you are making a difference. And ultimately that is unconditional recognition. You're doing the best you can. You're clear on what you're supposed to be doing, what you're aspiring to, and you're going to do the best you can to get close to that. And you don't have to be at it for you to celebrate and recognize yourself and others.
No, I agree with you 100%. I love that. Certainly we're never going to get it perfect, right? But as long as we know that we're progressing towards something, and I always say to people, resilience isn't about bouncing back, it's about growing through. Right. So if we want to be better versions of ourselves, better versions of our organizations next year than we were this year, and we can leverage the challenge and changes to do that. That's where most of us do our growing anyway. We don't grow when it's all comfortable and easy because there's no need to. It's when we problem solve and figure out these things that we acquire new skills and develop new character traits or strengthen them and become a better version of who we were as people and who we were as an organization than we were 6 months ago or a year ago.
So it's the lowering of the waterline that's been happening right now that allows us to see perhaps tracks that have always existed, not being clear on our why, not all perhaps rowing in the same direction, having procurement systems that were vulnerable and shortages
Sure.
that were just this close to it happening. And so by that being aware of it now, maybe I think what I'm hearing is this is where the growth happens. This is what defines industries, organizations, ministries, if it's about who funds you through to your, who helps fund your organization, to your clients, to you and your colleagues. It's maybe this is where the clarity happens, because the growth has to happen.
That's it, right? It's adapt or die, right? I mean, if you go back, so for example, if you go back to the Great Depression, then you look again at like 2008, 2007 and 08, when we had those big recessions, they were times obviously of great challenge, and lots of like companies, for example, just ceased to exist, went out of business. But there were also the times where many successful long-term businesses were founded and began and exploded because they took advantage of some shift that other people saw as a problem and they saw as an opportunity, right? So there are times, these are the times where you go, we're either going to crumble or we're going to see where we were weak and we're going to become stronger because we fixed that problem, and we're not going to have that problem the next time. Our healthcare systems are crumbling right now, but they were clearly weak before. It wasn't because everything was great and all of a sudden COVID broke things. COVID revealed a whole lot of problems that were already there, right? And so hopefully, keep our fingers crossed that government and other organizations are going to work together to solve those problems, and we'll have a stronger system in 3 or 4 years than we did before. But that remains to be seen. Yeah.
And in the meantime, different people will feel a different amount of comfort with where we're at right now. Totally. And so we'll keep your advice of, oh no, now what? Now, right? Now what?
Yeah. Oh no, now what?
Now what? Knowing and honoring for ourselves and others that there may be a difference between one point and the other. It's a very normal, expected human experience. And Absolutely. That is a sign that you deeply care, that you were engaged. If you didn't care about where you were at and realized that someone else was somewhere at a different point in their experience, then maybe you wouldn't be as engaged. So as I often tell my clients, and I'm curious if you share the same thing, your two most engaged people are the folks who are your cheerleaders and the people who are your complainers.
Yeah.
Get noisy, get curious, ask questions, have conversation, and let the struggle be the guide of what different will look like. And we don't have to like different necessarily. We can miss and want the old, so to speak, and also see something that is and also see what might happen could align, in fact, to our why and maybe help us to get there. So I'm really excited that people get a chance to empathetically for themselves and others and compassionately honor and acknowledge the oh no, now what journey that is in every aspect of what matters to us.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful that you've written a book recently so that people can tap in to be able to dig, because that's aspirations, one of many things I know you talk about in your model. Will you let us direct people as to where they can find that resource? Because I know they'll want more.
I would love to. Yeah. So the resilienceroadmapbook.com is the website. You can pre-order the book now. It will be out, depending on when you air this, it'll be out third week of June. So maybe out now when you're watching this, depending on when this goes live. Yeah, we'd love for you to grab a copy of the book and share it with your team, because I think it's one more tool in the toolbox, right? I don't pretend that it's going to solve all of the problems, but I think it does help us to think through in a more strategic way how we deal with challenge and change, which is not going away.
Thank you so much. Mr. Mark Black, coming to us live from New Brunswick, Canada. Shout out. I don't know why I'm doing the announcer voice. Sure. I guess maybe I haven't.
You're having fun. It's all right. It's good.
Having fun. I love spending time with you. Thank you so much.
Same. Thanks so much, Sarah.
I can't wait to read the book. I'm like, by the way, everyone, if you're curious, we're doing this interview at the beginning of June because I literally did not want to miss an opportunity for this to come out when the book's coming out. So I haven't even been able to get my hands on this copy. And
I
now
know. I don't even have hands. I don't even have, I have like proof ones with stripes through them that I can't even send people yet, but I'll have them very, very soon.
I can't wait. I can't wait. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thanks, Sarah.